This is part 2 of the online application demonstration. In part 1, we covered the process that an applicant goes through to actually make an online application. And in this part, we're going to cover how staff interacts with that application. Now, it's important to note that information that's added from the website is not automatically dumped into the eligibility and clients tables. Rather, it's kept in a separate table, and that helps prevent any kind of conflict situation from automatically arising. The second thing that we do is that we put the online application system for staff use behind a password protected form. And so that will keep everyone that is not authorized to go in and check conflicts and look over applications, keeps those people out from being able to see that confidential information. In this example, we have a special button under the Activity tab, and that button is called Screen Online Intakes. Now, if we click it, this is where we actually have our password, and so we would enter that, and now you see what should look like a familiar search screen for Prime users. The search screen itself operates pretty much just like any other search screen in the system. There are 3 buttons that we're going to look at specifically just to show how those operate. The first is the pending button, and what that does is that will just show the applications that are still awaiting some form of decision from staff. Now, you'll notice that when I opened this form, there were a total of 9 applications that were waiting, and if I click the pending button, you'll notice now that I've got a total of 7 buttons, or 7 applications that are still awaiting. The other buttons that are a little bit different are the password clean button, and if I click that, you'll notice that I'm warned that it's going to delete passwords for applications that are older than 60 days. We expect that most organizations are going to be able to make decisions upon applications and notify the applicant well more than before that 60-day period, but what this does is this allows staff to clean out passwords, effectively preventing the applicant from coming back in at a later date and looking at the status of their application again. We figure after 60 days there's really no point in taking up system resources to allow them to do that. I'll go ahead and click no here just to leave data intact. The other thing that we've got available to us is the delete application button. Now let's say that we were looking through our list of applications that needed to be reviewed, and we noticed that one of them was just junk. In other words, in here, instead of this saying James Spencer, it just had maybe some foul language or something like that. Just obviously somebody's gone in, played, or done whatever that's really not appropriate, and so we just want, instead of looking at it and trying to figure out what's going on, we just want to delete it outright. We can select it and then come over to the delete application button, click it, and it's going to warn us that the application is going to be deleted. And in this particular instance, I'll go ahead and I'll say yes, and you'll notice now that that application is gone. Even if I press the pending button, what you'll notice then is that the total number of waiting applications will actually drop by 1 because that application is literally gone and deleted from the system. So those are some of the different things about the search screen for the online application system. Let's go ahead and go into the application that we entered in part 1, and that's the Annabelle Staples here. And we'll open it. And you'll notice now that we've got what looks like a familiar input screen. You've got tabs across the top, you've got save and stay and close and some of the other familiar buttons there along the top. What is happening in this particular form is that things that are entered by the applicant will appear in the light blue, and areas where staff need to interact with it appear in dark blue. Additionally, if we look a little closer at this form, you'll notice that the tabs at the top appear to skip. In other words, we've got one conflict check, and 4, proceed or reject. And so that tells us right up front that something is being hidden from us. And that's that additional conflict information. Specifics about the case, income, assets, expenses, things like that are being hidden until a conflict check is performed and finished. Now down at the bottom, if we proceed to look at how a staff person would interact with this, the staff person would come in and they would probably fill in their staff number in their office. They might do some conflict checks, and you'll notice that these conflict screens look just like the regular conflict screens, and they operate just like the normal conflict check screens. So these won't require any kind of additional training for staff people. You've got the additional ability to look at the conflict search screen, search all people within the system, and search all phones to do a conflict check. Now, if we were to say that there was a conflict here, we drop down this box and we would say a conflict exists. I'll go ahead and click on that just to show how the system operates and what would happen. We're reminded that we found a conflict, and we're told that if we say yes to the "do you want to proceed" question, that it's going to erase that confidential information. And again, that's what would be in those additional tabs that are hidden. It would leave the contact information in place. In other words, we've got to have a way of notifying the person that a conflict exists and that we will not be able to help them. And so that conflict information stays there. It'll mark this application as rejected as a result of the conflict. We're reminded that we need to tell the applicant about the rejection and then record the contact on the proceed or reject tab. Now, because I want to show the additional tabs, I'll go ahead and I'll click no here. But functionally, what would have happened is on the final page, the proceed or reject, it would have been marked as rejected for conflict and put in the date of decision, and then you could have put in that the person was contacted and how in order to comply with regulations. Back on page 1, the other alternative, as opposed to finding a conflict, is to say that there is no conflict. I'll go ahead and choose that so that we can see the rest of the screens. And you notice this top area, as I mentioned before, is information that the applicant has filled out. The same thing remains true on the other tabs. Page 2, we've got the review of issues, which is the problem code, things they want us to do, where their problem is located, why we should help, and additional associated client information or client entered information. Page 3 or tab 3, we get the income details, so we see the adults and children, the income, the assets, and the monthly expenses that were entered. On this page also, we have the ability to compute the LSC poverty levels, and if some information had been entered for expenses, then our net poverty percent here would have been different, obviously. Page 5 just has comments. Those are the comments that could have been entered by the applicant as to how to make the application easier. Now, from that point, on page 4, again, the top information is information that the applicant entered. So we've got their password that they chose. So if something happens that they call back in and say, I forgot, or I don't remember, or they need it reset for some reason, you can come in here and you can do that. Below that, we've got how the applicant wants us to contact them. Here we chose phone and mail, and we are also notified that the applicant is planning on logging back into the system. Now below that is the staff interaction, and we have the ability to track, as noted before, whether or not they were contacted. To the right, if we had approved this for a full application and moved on and gone to eligibility or clients, then that case number would be shown here. Below that, we show how we contacted the applicant by phone, by mail, or whatever. If this online application is accepted, in other words, if the organization wants to move on with it and consider it further by proceeding with either eligibility or full client entry, you can check this box. An alternative is if you find some reason to reject it, like maybe they're out of your service area, maybe they're over income, or whatever reason, you can choose one of the items in the drop down box to note it as rejected, and then you've got a date of decision, which either approved or rejected. You can keep track of when that decision was made. The portions in yellow are used. First off, the one on the left, the current status, is what's actually shown on the website to the applicant should they log back in. So let's say, by way of example, that we look at this and we need to get some additional papers from them. What we could do is we could put in this drop down, we could select the application is on hold, awaiting papers. I'll choose that. And then below that, in the application status text, we're notified of the fact that this will be seen by the applicant if they log back in. So in this part, we might say something like, we need the paperwork showing whatever, and please send it to James Spencer, Managing Attorney, Legal Services, and then Springfield, Mo, on whatever the address is. Now, if we go from here and we go back over into the application system, and we go in and we log into the application online, and we'll just go into here, and let's check on the status of an existing application. And here we'll put in our user ID and our password. And we'll look in here and we'll see that our application is on hold awaiting papers. We need the paperwork showing whatever. Please send it to James Spencer, Managing Attorney, Legal Aid, Springfield, Mo 65802. So you can see very quickly and easily that this is pretty much a real-time system. We just entered that from the front end. The applicant, as soon as they log in, then would see the new information. Now, back in the intake, let's say we got the paperwork, everything looks good, and so we're ready to proceed. Let's go ahead and let's reopen the Annabelle Staples and go to the proceed or reject portion. And here on the last page, the other thing that we can do is we can go ahead and say that the application has been approved for intake. We will take out the pending so that it does not show up as a pending application in the search screen anymore. Let's say the application has been accepted. We'll put in today's date. And then from that point, what we could do is we could choose eligibility to send this to the eligibility tab, to send it to the conflicts and clients. In other words, you'd skip eligibility, and some programs have chosen to do that because eligibility is already basically checked here in the application process. And then the third option is to do all three. So we bring all the income and assets and expenses over into eligibility. We add the names to the conflict table, and then we also enter the appropriate information in the client's intake screen. Depending upon what an organization wants to do and what kind of flow they want to have for online applications, we expect 2 of the 3 buttons there to be taken out, and that would basically force everyone into that particular method of proceeding from the online application stage. One thing I did not mention is that you've got form letters that are available to you. The form letters allow you to send out either approval or rejection letters from this point without having to proceed any further. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the eligibility, just so you get an idea of how it transfers and what and things like that. You'll notice here that any of the data points that are the same from the online application system come over. So all of the address and contact information is all here, telephone number. The income, assets, and expenses also all come over, as do adults and children, gender, their citizenship status, poverty percent, all of that comes over. Now, since I just did eligibility, there are a number of data points in the online application that do not directly map to something in the eligibility table, and so you'll notice that those additional fields are here in the eligibility notes. Now, if I had gone to the client screen, those would have come over and been put in their appropriate locations. Only really those items that are not in the form that you transfer to, those items that are not in the form go to notes. So even over in the client section, there would be a note entered that had additional data in it. And that is really part 2 of the online application system.